Hello.
Yes, I'm the living proof that gravity sometimes have unexpected effects. Dear colleagues from the space community, dear students, ladies and gentlemen, dear virtual audience, it's a great honor for me to welcome you to the French Embassy as we gear up for the launch of the James Webb Space Telescope from the European spaceport in French Guiana. I know that this launch has been eagerly anticipated for a number of years by the members of the space community, of course. They have been working on this incredible project for years, but also by scientists, as the mission will advance our knowledge of the universe to even greater degree. It's been eagerly anticipated by the public as well, as the telescope will give us a closer look at the beginning of time and the origins of human life. And of course, diplomats like me are also very much looking forward to this launch, as it offers such a perfect illustration of how international cooperation enables us to achieve impossible goals. I am no astronomer, far from it, but I know that the space environment is particularly harsh and presents the greatest technical challenges. And I am always amazed to see how the space community manages to overcome those challenges through a breathtaking combination of expertise, passion, and privileged international partnerships. The James Webb Telescope perfectly embodies these characteristics. On the technical front, it reflects the phenomenal resilience and perseverance of all the engineers who spent 30 years developing this technological marvel, some 60 feet long with a gigantic, almost 20-foot wide primary mirror, the largest ever flown in space, operating at ultra-cold temperatures and orbiting nearly 1 million miles from Earth. And these are just a few examples of the telescope's extraordinary features. The James Webb Telescope also offers an excellent illustration of our strong commitment to expanding scientific knowledge for the benefit of humanity. Successor to the Hubble telescope that taught us so much about our universe over the past 30 years, the James Webb Telescope is about to inaugurate a new era in our quest to understand our origins, looking more closely at the very first galaxies and raising more fundamental questions for current and future generations. Speaking of future generations, I'm very pleased to welcome students from Thomas Jefferson High School and George Washington University. They will be at the forefront of this new chapter in the science of the universe. Finally, the telescope is an eloquent example of the benefits of global partnership in space and science. The human adventure in space is not an easy one. The development of ambitious missions has long relied on close relationships among spacefaring nations. The James Webb Telescope is no exception. By combining the illustrious expertise of the United States, France, Europe, and Canada, it demonstrates the high value of international cooperation in advancing science, as well as the tremendous power of science in advancing friendship among nations. I can tell you that I'm very proud that the telescope will be launched on board an Ariane 5 from French Guiana, a little piece of France in South America. I would also like to extend my most heartfelt thanks to the United States and NASA for their trust, not only in this extraordinary mission, but more generally with regard to our long-standing, fruitful relationship, reflected by the many successful missions and programs that we have pursued, are pursuing, and will continue to pursue in close cooperation. Before we go ahead with the exciting discussions, I would like to warmly thank the French-American Cultural Foundation. You expertly promote the centuries-old French-American relationship in many fields, including space. And today we are especially grateful that you have given us the opportunity to meet in person, despite the challenging COVID situation. I would like also to thank all our panelists, whom we have the honor to welcome today. They represent the thousands of people involved in this historic project, and to whom I want to express my gratitude for the strong commitment vital to both science and diplomacy. So it is my pleasure to welcome the first panelist on the stage. Stéphane Israël is the Chief Executive Officer of Arianespace, a French company founded in 1980 as the world's first commercial launch service provider. It undertakes in particular the operation and marketing of Ariane 5 that will have the responsibility to put the telescope safely on the right orbit. Dr. Thomas Zurbrücken is the Associate Administrator for the Science Mission Directorate at NASA. He has a tremendous experience in space science and research, in engineering and entrepreneurship. And Dr. Zurbrücken is a true advocate of science. And we are honored that Chris Davenport has accepted to moderate the panels today. Chris, from the Washington Post, is a brilliant author and one of the best space and defense reporters. So thank you all again for being here today, either in person at the French Embassy or virtually worldwide. And I wish you an excellent event. I'll slowly start my orbiting down to the room now.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you everyone for coming. Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Is this on? Yes, good. This is a real pleasure to be here with Stéphane and Thomas, and I want to thank the Embassy and the French-American Cultural Foundation for putting this event on. I'm Chris Davenport from the Washington Post. We've got two panels. One, we're going to talk about the French and American collaboration, and then we'll get into the science. On the other one, and just a note about COVID, everyone in the audience is masked. They had proof of vaccines or a negative test, and of course, we're socially distanced up here. Obviously, what brings us to the stage today is this marvel of a telescope that we're about to see launch, and now we have a launch date, December 18th, which is very exciting. But let's place this, Thomas, you would begin in this broader context of the way that France and the United States, NASA, the French Space Agency, and Europe have all worked together over the years.
I really appreciate that kickoff question. And the way I think about our collaborations, of course, is when we look at nature, we look at the sky, we look at the earth, we recognize we're one humanity working together, all at once. Our taxpayers, of course, have passports. I'm in the United States. We are so fortunate to have a support of our government to do the work here. But we realize that when we work together with France, for example, as well as others, we can do more with the same money to benefit all of us. And our collaboration with France is a really great example of that. We, of course, have collaborations, I would say, in 3 areas that are really dominant. The first one is starting in the early 90s, looking at oceans around the Earth. And we looked at with Topex Poseidon, looking at the first real altimetry measurement of the oceans. That, of course, is a series of measurements. Right now, there's a spacecraft in France that is undergoing integration and test that will launch next year, SWAT, as we call it, which is in that lineage. Again, a collaboration between NASA and CNES, the French Space Agency. We do a lot of work on Mars with an instrument right now on Perseverance, another that just made news all over because of the first measurements of the interior of Mars And of course, right here, together with my good friend Stefan, and of course, together with the European Space Agency as well, on Webb as well as others.
Stefan, do you want to take that as well from the perspective?
Yes, for sure. In fact, what will happen the 18th of December in the Guiana Space Center and with Ariane 5 is a result of a long, long journey we have done with the United States of America. So Arianespace is a European company, but we are established in the US since 1982. Next year, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of our establishment here. We have orbited more than 300 payloads, either for US operators or manufactured by US satellite manufacturers. This is a commercial area. And it comes that year after year, we have also engaged a collaboration with NASA through the collaboration between NASA, CNES, ESA. TOPEX Poseidon in 1992 has been a breakthrough. And after this breakthrough, after this first launch in 2002, we started to think about James Webb. What I understand is that we owe that to two people, Mike Griffin, who was NASA administrator, and Jean-Jacques Dordain, who was ESA general secretary. And these people have invented this cooperation, and we are there almost 20 years after. Now it's a question of weeks.
And Thomas, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, the history of this collaboration and how this relationship has evolved over the years and even the decades.
So I think Stefan is right. The history of collaboration of nations so often have names associated with them. And they have consistency and trust associated with them. You should know, last week I was in France meeting with the head of CNES. And that is not just because I did it because of this meeting. It's because this is a regular set of interactions that are there. So I would like to say that the stable collaborations we have in the history that has brought us here is one of multi-layers. Our scientists collaborate in a direct fashion. We have the same data policies. The data are used out there by the whole world to get the maximum science out of our planets, but also then at our level, all the way just now between Stefan and I, the European Space Agency, CNES. We have that, and then many layers in between that have built up. The way I would think about it is really a collaboration that started with a breakthrough, that mission that we already talked about in '92, building multifaceted, if you want, centers of collaboration, whether it's in Martian science, whether it's in astrophysics, whether it's in also in human exploration, of course, with Thomas Pesquet up there right now, and making news in France almost every week, right, and including the United States, right? So it's these layers that have built layers of trust and layers of success. Success breeds success, and so for us, we're really an international team.
And it's Thomas Pesquet. There's always one astronaut on the International Space Station who's sort of the social media phenomenon who's taking all the pictures, and I think this crew's the sort of star of the space station, if you will. One quick follow-up on that. As this model going forward. NASA's got the Artemis Accord, and obviously, France is a big part of that. But that sort of sets the rules of the road in space to a degree, but also talks about and strengthens these collaborations where space agencies need to share their scientific discoveries. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, because that I think is a really important framework that NASA's been working on.
I really agree with that. So besides the interpersonal and the interagency connections that really are built on trust and success that go forward, the framework in which they operate need to be rock solid and consistent. The way we believe, the direction of good, if you know what I mean, how we believe about what our company's roles are, what are, how we can commercially, benefit in space, also how we use space to protect our own nations and so forth. That belief system, whether it's together at the moon, whether it's here on Earth, how we observe, whether it's the data policies for James Webb, we need to have the same overall playing book. And so the Artemis Accords is a huge step forward for that in the context of human exploration of the moon and, of course, robotic exploration as well, really setting that context together. And our discussions with the French agency as well as others continue on that.
And Stefan, I wonder if you can talk about, how the relationship has evolved. I must say that I think I speak with you as much as almost any other, rocket CEO executive of all the ones we have in the U.S. It seems like you are in the United States quite frequently, and we share the stage at these events. But from your perspective, I wonder if you can talk about your reception here in the U.S. and how that's grown.
No, for sure. So again, it's clear that from a commercial standpoint, Arianespace has a very strong grip here in the United States because, as it was said by the embassy, in fact, we invented the commercial launch at the beginning of the 1980s. Now, we are not alone in the world, and competition is here, and we perfectly acknowledge it. But when we started to make commercial launches, it was almost created by Arianespace, and we did it because in Europe, we do not have the sufficient number of institutional launches to have the right level of activities and cadence. And so some people coming from CNES, coming from industry, at the very beginning of the 80s, said we are going to be a commercial launch service provider. And the United States being the largest market, for sure it was important to come here. And this is what we did with our Washington office. We have worked for Intelsat, we have worked for EchoStar, we have worked for many operators here in the US. And it is true that doing so, we have had established contact with NASA. We have worked on the tracking stations together. We have made more recently the Gold mission for NASA. And this journey of James Webb is incredible because, it has started almost 20 years ago. And you have some people who are on this project and who are still on this project. In NASA, in Northrop Grumman, in Arianespace, it's really amazing. And I think it's one of the specificity of the space community. You have a limited number of people who are really, really becoming a family, having worked together. And what is very important is that we have given full transparency to NASA. I mean, it's very important for NASA. It's a key project. And in a partnership with NASA, with the European Space Agency, we make a lot of reporting because it's very important that you are confident to embark with us. Ariane 5 has made 105 successes. It is the most or one of the most reliable launchers in the world. And I can tell you that we are focused.
And you mind if I just ask, we have a lot of students here, and I just really want to talk to the students in the context of international collaborations. One of the coolest things of being in our industry is that it is international. You should expect, if you join our industry, that you will work with a high degree of certainty with international collaborators, that you will travel, that you will see other worlds, and that in many cases you will form friendships that are transcending boundaries that you don't even know exist yet. And so for me, as a researcher, my accent is from Switzerland. I grew up there. Somebody said, right, that's why I have this name that nobody can pronounce, not even me. So basically, so you learn, get to know these other worlds. And for me, that's one of the most rewarding things. I just really want to tell you, and kind of new ideas that are brought in by you with your backgrounds really matter. You see, this particular mission took 20 years. Think where you are in 20 years. You're at the heyday of your professional lives. And you could be shoulder to the wheel on the next big thing. And you could do that in an international collaboration that really makes your life richer. So 2 things, join it. Secondly, learn another language. So that is really important, I believe, to kind of get to know, kind of get to respect that there are other ways of doing things, and we can trust and kind of become stronger teams together because of that. I hope that's useful.
And I would encourage all of you to pigeonhole Dr. Zurbuchen after this and get your resume in front of him. Actually, I've seen him around students. He just absolutely loves it. Go ahead.
Yes, no, maybe to the students who are with us today, what I would like to add, space is all about innovation and technology. Space is all about, as you have said, international cooperation, and also, which has, I think, also a very nice flavor, cooperation between public and private sector. It is really a community where you have top companies private companies, and you work a lot with the public sector, because as we see today, most of our projects are also driven by the public sector. So innovation, international cooperation, and public-private partnership, I think these three reasons are good reasons to start engaging in space.
So as part of that collaboration, let's talk about French Guiana and the launch site. Thomas, you went down there to see it. Tell us about what you saw, what the experience was like being down there. I mean, it's got to be one of the most exciting, unusual, and thrilling launch sites there is in the world.
Oh, God, yeah, it really is. So let me just tell you how that story went. I took off in the morning from Puerto Rico. It's like, why from Puerto Rico? Well, we have all of the science program, and we actually had a science mission right there. Let me tell you what it was. We were overflying with a NASA airplane the forest there, the rainforest in French Guiana, because a week later, the space station was overflying it with an instrument that looked at the health and the exact make of that forest, of course, looking at our own planet. So there I was. After we did that work, I was landing in French Guiana. First of all, there was a thunderstorm, and I was really glad to know that the pilot was a well-educated Air Force pilot in the past. So we flew through that thunderclouds, and we landed, and it was immediately clear we were in a different world. It is a world that is high-tech, the incredibly high-tech, and beautiful, and, incredible, just amazing environment. On the other hand, it is a world in South America that looks very different to my eyes, to, for example, my launch site I always go to, which is in Florida, right? Where this year we're going to launch, a series of more missions from NASA. So I loved being there, both experiencing the tremendous, of course, friendship of my international colleagues, but also and seeing the launch there, going into the sky. You saw the picture just there. It's a picture that was taken during that launch, but also experiencing the environment, the hospitality of that amazing community that was there, kind of experiencing the food that from that region of the world. So I just really loved it. It was almost like a vacation and work together.
That's the best kind of work. And Stefan, also tell us a little bit about that visit, but talk about the rocket. We've got Ariane 6 here, which is the next generation.
Yes.
You'll be launching the telescope on the Ariane 5, and I know you've been doing a lot to prepare for this mission. You had said, taking every precaution, but it's this really very precious cargo, and I know you've taken a lot of care with the rocket.
Yes, so here you have the next generation rocket, Ariane 6. Ariane 6 will fly next year, and for Webb, we will fly with Ariane 5. Ariane 5 has been introduced in 1996, and Ariane 5 basically has the overall same design as Ariane 6. We have solid boosters, and on Ariane 5 we have two very big solid boosters. We have then two liquid stage, the main stage you see here, the upper stage, and for sure the satellite which is under the fairing, which is very important for Webb because we need to avoid some pressurization effect due to the volume of Webb, and this is one of the specificities of this launch. We have made special design adaptation on the fairing, which, by the way, have been tested during the launch. You were with us, and it has been perfectly tested. The second specificity is all what regards cleanliness, because Webb for sure is a jewel, and we must make sure that the cleanliness is absolutely perfect. So we have taken additional measures during the satellite preparation, the telescope preparation, and during the final assembly and the meeting with the rocket to make sure that the cleanliness will be perfect. So all in all, in October, the telescope will arrive in Guiana by boat, and then we will have a campaign of 8 weeks, a little more than that. It is longer than a normal campaign because a normal campaign for a commercial satellite is more 4 weeks. And then the launch. And so it will last 27 minutes. You can imagine during these 27 minutes, we will all be very, very dedicated to what is going to successfully happen. And after 27 minutes, a bit like a classical GTO mission, it will be the separation, and then the telescope will go to the very famous Lagrangian point, L2.
Right. We talk a lot about that 7 minutes of terror, but you've got 27 minutes. You're look at, just real quick on the launcher, what are the key milestones that you'll be looking to clear with the rocket?
Yes, so the rocket has arrived in Guiana. It is now under container. We have next Ariane 5, which will take place end October. And once this Ariane 5 will be done, then we will start the final campaign of the rocket. We have what we call an integration facility, and then we have a final assembly facility where we are making the mating with the satellite. So the campaign duration will be approximately 2 months, and it will start mid of October, end of October for the launch, which will be the 18th of December. And then after, we have the classical events of the launch sequence. We have the ignition of the Vulcain. 7 seconds after the H0, we have the ignition of the solid boosters, and this is the liftoff. Then we have the separation of the solid booster. We have the separation of the fairing. We have the separation of the main stage 8-9 minutes after liftoff. And then the upper stage is making the final phase of the mission. So we are going to follow very carefully all these parameters, but we know them quite well. I mean, we have done that many times. And for sure, in parallel, we are making all the launch readiness review to guarantee the flight worthiness of the rocket.
And we've just got a few minutes left, Thomas, but a couple of questions that I want to ask. The first one is looking forward for future opportunities to collaborate. Obviously, we've got this on the International Space Station. That's going to be extended, but I know NASA's already looking to what comes next. I mean, what are the bigger opportunities as we go, with the Artemis program, we go to Mars? I mean, what do you think the opportunities are?
Well, I believe that there's opportunities for international collaboration in all domains that we're doing. Right now, frankly, the reason I was in France primarily is to talk about Earth system science opportunities. So I just want you to know, we just kicked off what we call the Earth System Observatory. Remember, we just landed on Mars with our rover. So we take the same amount of money and put it into our own planet with a series of missions. And then with additional international collaborations that help us look at our planet in a totally new way together and immediately take the data and transform it into applications on Earth, because of course our planet is changing and we want to make sure we equip our own world here in the US, but also elsewhere to do that. So to react to that and to thrive on that changing planet. So for us, there's a lot of collaborations already. We believe that as we go forward, even now with Mars sample return, remember we just collected the first 2 samples. By the way, I sleep a lot better after this. This was actually we talk about it as a historic moment with my job, and you're going to see Greg Robinson, his job, he's focused on risk, like what could go wrong. So I just want to tell you on this Mars rover, this was the most risky part other than entry, descent, and landing. So it was kind of, in my risk chart, it's that equally high risk. So the fact that it worked, I'm just so proud of that team. So Mars, sample return, and so forth will have strong French contributions, will have strong international contributions. We're expecting in a month or so our kind of strategic guidance in astrophysics of where the next big direction should be for astrophysics. I have no doubt that no matter what that guidance is, the implementation of that strategy will include international contributions. And the same, of course, is true in heliophysics and in kind of sciences overall.
And I've got to ask you before we go, the next panel, we'll really get into the science of the telescope and the engineering, but I've got to ask you, because I know you're so enthusiastic about it, in terms of Webb, what are you looking forward to the most? What do you think the biggest discoveries will be?
So let me just tell you, when we're done with Webb, we'll look at the night sky in a very different fashion, just like with Hubble. You close your eye and you say space or galaxy, what you're really seeing is a Hubble image. We're changing how we look at the sky everywhere in our minds. And for me, the most amazing thing I'm looking forward to is really imaging that first generation galaxy. So for me, the first generation galaxies, kind of 200, 300 million years after the Big Bang, there's a gap in our storybook. Imagine you look at an album of a child. You see the birth image, background radiation, right? So there's Nobel Prizes there. And there's like so and so many pages missing. And then we see the Hubble images and we see X-rays and we see, that chapter there, the early chapter, the childhood chapter of our universe is something we're going to fill in. For me, there's so many questions about this that that picture, these pictures, that analysis will tell us about both our own history and the history of everything we know and have, and kind of the wonders again of our night sky in a way that we can only guess today. We're always surprised in a positive when we look at nature. That will happen here also, Chris.
Yeah. And Stefan, just real quick, if you could talk about the significance of the fact that it's being launched, by a French space company to take us.
No, for us, it's very important because, to be honest, after this launch, Ariane 5 will have definitely entered in the legend and in history, because this will be one of the most important missions ever done in space, in fact. So you can imagine how proud and how grateful we are to NASA. That's it. I mean, I think our community really needs cooperation, and this is for us a unique opportunity to show our level of professionalism. In terms of overall trust we can put in the Ariane sector and the Ariane 5 today, Ariane 6 tomorrow, it's very important. Thomas was speaking about Mars sample return. The rocket you have on my left will be the one which is going to send what we call the Earth Return Orbiter, the spacecraft which will catch the Mars sample to bring them to Earth. So it will be in 2026, and it will be the third launch linked to the Mars sample return mission, and it will be delivered by Ariane 6. So it will be also a very nice example of cooperation. But I was just coming back to what Thomas has said. I'm not sure there are many domains or many jobs on Earth where you can say that what you have done is changing the way we look at the sky. Not so bad. Huh? Quite impressive.
I think that's an excellent note to end this. I want to thank my panelists, Thomas and Stefan, for an excellent discussion. I really enjoyed it. And I just noticed Thomas' socks, which of course, yes, thanks. Got to showcase those. Those are fantastic.
I'm sorry, mine are more
Most
conventional.
interesting thing about me is my socks.
But thank you again for joining us. Thank you all for being here. And of course, we're going to do it again in just a little bit with the second panel. And should we invite the students up to the stage for a picture? And please, I encourage you to hit Thomas up and Stefan up. Get your resumes in front of them, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's a Mia. More difficult than Thomas. Should we do one like that? With the space community, we like that.
I love it. Should I just stay here?
Yes.
to the stage, please. Have mics complete there, wherever you like. Don't prefer order. However you. So we're going to get into the meat of the program now and talk about the science and the engineering, which I'm particularly excited about with this panel for sure, which I will introduce. Gregory Robinson at the end, James Webb Space Telescope Program Director from NASA. So this is a big deal for you and obviously in your agency. Next to him is Mackenzie Lystrup, the Vice President General Manager of Civil Space Strategic Business Unit at Ball Aerospace. Antonella Nota, the Associate Director of the European Space Agency, and Scott Willoughby, Vice President, Program Manager for the Webb Telescope at Northrop Grumman, illustrating once again what we were talking about on the last panel, international collaboration and these role of industry in the public-private partnerships that we have on big missions like this. So thank you all for joining me. Why don't we start with you, Antonella? I mean, talk about the science, and that Thomas Zurbuchen had given us a taste of, but what are the big discoveries that you think we're going to have?
So the discoveries will be just amazing. And as Thomas said, to fill that gap, Hubble, has pushed our understanding of the distant universe to 400 million years before and after the Big Bang. Well, we believe the James Webb will push that door open and will just go way past. And we will be surprised to see how the early universe, the first galaxies, how they formed, how they assembled, what made the galaxies that we see today. So this will be really a phenomenal discovery, but it will not be the only one, because Webb has several themes. And for example, one very close to my heart is star formation. Astronomers really do not know how stars form. So Webb will look at star formation regions in the infrared, where exactly you can see through the dust and through the gas and see the baby stars being formed and see how they develop from the molecular clouds where they provide the fuel to their birth. So that would be just spectacular, and I expect the images to be phenomenal. Of course, Webb will study extrasolar planets outside our solar system. We know that there are so many. Just remember, when Hubble was launched, we knew none. But in 30 years of splendid Hubble work and other missions like TESS and Kepler, we know that the universe is filled with planets outside our solar system. And Hubble has been pioneering the technique to look at the atmosphere and study those atmospheres and figure out what are the elements that are part. And so Webb will just, with a factor of 100 in sensitivity, will revolutionize that field. And the last thing I want to say is the unexpected will be phenomenal, because yes, we know the broad theme, but with Hubble in 30 years, we've been surprised so many times. And with Webb, we expect that we will have one surprise after the next.
And Greg, I wonder if you just, for the audience, kind of give us an overview of the telescope, how it's going to work, where it's going to be, and what it is like to manage, a program of, this ambition, $10 billion. And I mean, you guys are really going big with this. So give us, the overview of the whole program.
So thanks, Chris. So as we talk about baby universe, I'm the baby on James Webb. I've been on the program 3.5 years. Even Scott Willoughby here on my right, an older baby, about 10 years. Some of the people here and other colleagues on 20 years. So it's been around a long time, certainly a significant investment. But if you want to do bold things, you have to make the investment, time or money or something else. I normally use the analogy of the New York Yankees, certainly in their heyday, never goes away. Major investments, but they won many World Series, became the brand of Major League Baseball, and everyone started chasing them. Everyone got better. So today, Major League Baseball and sports are far better because of those investments of one organization. So in the case of NASA and this global community that Thomas and Stefan talked about, it's important to make these investments. I think this is the right one for Webb. And pretty soon we'll see all of the benefits from it. And other missions that are currently out there, and certainly future missions, will come up just like the New York Yankees because of the results of James.
So James Webb, the Derek Jeter of space. I like that. Mackenzie, when we look across the space enterprise, and I'm talking about, the history of the things that we've accomplished in space, where do you think this will rank in terms of its ambition and its significance?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that this is the most ambitious thing that we have done in space. If you look at the technological development that it took to be able to get the telescope where it is, this was the culmination of decades and decades of technology development. Before we even had conceived what Webb would be, there were technology developments leading up to this moment. We have a mirror segment right here in front of me that is one of the 18, a model of one of the 18 mirror telescopes. The actual segments are more than a meter across, and that's what makes up the entire system. And there are a number of developments just in these mirror segments alone. One, we used beryllium to be able to really lightweight and stiffen the material of the substrate of the telescope, and then the cover, the front of the telescope mirrors coated in gold, and that's because it's highly reflective in the infrared, and this is an infrared telescope. And then on the back side, which I think is the cooler side, we've got these actuators, these little small motors, gear motors that work on the back of every telescope, on the back of every segment, and those adjust the mirrors in increments of nanometers. And a nanometer is, if you take a human hair width, that's like 100,000 nanometers. So to build these kinds of electronics that can withstand the extreme cold that the telescope is going to be held at, which I'm sure Scott's going to talk a bit about as well, to be able to develop that electronics was a really major accomplishment. So it really took many people over many decades. When I say many, just at Ball Aerospace alone, and we were involved in the optics system here, the mirror system, more than 1,300 of our employees were involved with Webb at some point. Not full time, right? But more than 1,000 cumulative person hours were devoted to the work that was done at Ball. And that's one piece of the overall mission. And it goes to what Greg was saying about having to do bold things to achieve bold science. And so I think if you look at just the technology that went into Webb, it's, I think, the most ambitious thing that we've done. And as Antonella said, the science is going to be probably most exciting in the places we have no idea even where to ask the questions yet.
So, Scott, we heard Stefan talk about, the launch and how the launch has to go right. You've been working very hard to make sure that this telescope, that when it's deployed, everything is going to go right. I wonder if you can talk about, that the road to get there, the challenges you've overcome, because where it's going to be, it's not like Hubble, where you can go out and send some astronauts and fix it. Once it's deployed, it's 1,000,000 miles away. It's on its own. So if you could just, give us that overview.
So to, again, paint this picture, this is a 6.5 meter optic in a 5 meter fairing. So we have to fold it. It's an optic that's going to stare in the infrared. So we have to be colder than what we're looking for. Otherwise, we'll just see ourselves. So we're going to get it down to minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit, 38 Kelvin, 38 above absolute zero. And we do that with a giant deployable, it looks like a parachute, right? It's a 5-layer capped on sunshield. That's the size of a tennis court, but again, has to start off. So we compact this transformer into a configuration so we can leave Earth. And when you talk about the complexities of designing and develop something, test, it's an understated part, because we talk about a design of an optic, which is incredibly important, a design of a sunshield, but to prove on the ground something's going to work in space, you have to continue to trick it. So we're in gravity. We learned that from our host. Gravity had an impact in her life there with the cast on her foot. Gravity is always bringing things down. Now imagine you let gravity deploy something for you, and then you go on orbit. You may have thought it will deploy successfully, but if gravity helped you, That's not a good thing. On the other side, gravity is a force that is going to pull on these things actually harder than in orbit, because in 0G, we want these mechanisms to float into place. So we design them to do that and come in a precise thing. But gravity is trying to pull those things down. It can overstress a hinge or a joint or that stuff. So we have as many engineers that design technology for space, that design technology for test, that come up with this incredibly elegant ways of from underneath or the side of counteracting gravity in of itself, right? So that we can 0G. I mean, a little trick on the sun shield itself, these big floppy membranes, again, like if you want to understand the contour of a large sail in space, well, it's in gravity, it's going to get to where it's tensioned or in zero gravity on Earth. But what we do is we take it and we bring it in one orientation to gravity, and then we measure its surface figure error. Then we turn it upside down and we measure it again. And then in a mathematical model, we subtract those two because they're 180 out, and that's what it would float like in space. We have to test it twice, right? So those are just small examples of what we've had to do under the span of 20 years. And it's truly why no one company, no one organization, no one country could ever have done something this ambitious, because we are bringing just everybody's best to the table.
And we've been, a few times Hubble has come up. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the differences of the two telescopes and, the results that they may end up producing.
I think that, the synergy between Hubble and Webb will be phenomenal, because Hubble is covering a different wavelength regime from the ultraviolet to the optical. Yes, it's a small telescope, but it's doing quite a lot of stuff out of the atmosphere. Webb will extend into the infrared in a region where we do not really know that much. There have been missions, but not at the level of sensitivity and spatial resolution that Webb will have. So as a scientist, I'm looking forward to have them both in orbits together, because I think that the compendium of the two will be just phenomenal from a scientific point of view. Of course, Webb is extremely more sensitive, and that's why we're hoping that we'll go where Hubble has not gone. And the early universe is a clear example, but there are so many areas, for example, in regions that are rich in dust and gas. Webb will be able to reach where Hubble didn't. So expect to be really surprised and amazed, because I think we'll have completely, rewritten the astronomy books when Webb is done.
Think about that. That's extraordinary. We're talking a lot about the science, but Mackenzie, I wonder if you can touch on sort of the cultural aspect of this. We think about those images from Hubble, right, and how they resonate in popular culture and society. We think of the pale blue dot of Earth taken from the moon, which, is the most reproduced image in the history of photography and helped touch off Earth Day. What is going to be the cultural impact of Webb?
Absolutely. I know. I'm so glad that you brought this up, because Antonella was just describing the complementarity of Hubble and Webb. And earlier, Thomas was talking about, when you think of the night sky, you often think of Hubble images. And the cultural impact, I think, is going to be significant. And that's one of the things about these kinds of space missions, the ones that really, change the textbooks. That's kind of the cliche, but they fundamentally change the way that we think about ourselves and our place in the universe. They fundamentally change our understanding of science and really move us into new types of scientific questions. And that science is really critical, but it's also a cultural endeavor. What we do is human culture when we do these missions. And so, when you think about what Hubble has done, the science has been critical, the technology, great, and all of that is important and culturally significant. But if you think about the number of people who have been touched by those Hubble images, the people who have been inspired to learn more about science and the world around them, and the people who have just thought of, the kind of the big philosophical questions that people have been asking since since human history, looking up at the night sky and asking, are we alone? Where did the universe come from, and what are its origins? Those are fundamental philosophical, natural philosophy, and science questions. And Webb is going to delve us further into those questions than we've ever done before. So I think the cultural significance cannot be underestimated.
And Danella, did you want to jump in there?
Yes, I wanted to say that, the other important thing to remember that this mission have made astronomy accessible to the entire world. You just need to have a laptop and an idea wherever you are. If you have an internet connection, you can actually submit your idea to be implemented on the telescope. Hubble has opened that way, Webb will continue. And I think the impact will be, exactly what Mackenzie said, but amplified million times because the entire world will be connected. We called Hubble the People Telescope. I think this will be the universe telescope and will be so powerful just because everybody will be reaching out to and see the amazing data that will come down, starting from the early release observation and the great discovery.
And it's interesting, we talk about the Apollo generation, now you talk about the Artemis generation, and we tend to view that through human exploration, but I love this concept of, the Webb generation and the cultural manifestations, and just so you know, I'm stealing that for one of my Washington Post articles, we talk about, they're new scoops, but they're conceptual scoops, and I'm taking that. Gregory, I think this came up on the earlier panel, but I want you to just talk about risk and risk management, because there are a lot of eggs in this basket. This is some precious cargo. How do you, sort of get to the point to say, okay, she's ready to fly?
So Scott touched on a lot of this. And we design, build, test based on the mission, accomplished, technology developed over the years. So the amazing team, actually more than 10,000 people have touched Webb during this lifetime. And I'll get back to the risk in just a second. Another shout out I'd like to give is to our external stakeholders, the administrations, plural, and our congressionals, plural. The amazing support of all the years. That's not easy for a long development mission. It's been absolutely amazing. Certainly they've challenged us when we've run into problems, but the support never really wavered. So truly appreciated everyone supporting that. As far as risk, some of the big areas Scott touched on, sunshield deployments, telescope deployments, and many other smaller deployments that we don't talk about that much. Some technologies, more than 10, first time ever flown in space. That's not trivial. Most missions have 1 or 2, maybe 3 is a stretch. So very different. But when you have an amazing team that knows what they're doing and they redo it, they make a mistake, they don't put their tails between the legs, they find out how to fix it. They reach across the globe and find partners that know how to do this stuff. And also with this global community, we have instruments and many other parts that are built all over the world. Some of these amazing images are not from instruments that are built in the US. So we're really proud of that, from the Canadian Space Agency to ESA. 29 states across the US touched us, 14 countries. It's almost unprecedented. It's almost like the International Space Station, right? When you look at partnerships. So from a risk standpoint, certainly I think we've overcome all of those challenges, but risk never goes away. We pound it as flat as we can, and I think we've gotten there pretty far on the observatory. We know we have an amazing, reliable rocket, so I think we're ready. I've worked many launches in my life, and 22 shuttle launches. The butterflies never go away. When you get to the pad, when the count starts, and that journey to space on the rocket, every phase of that, butterflies go down a little bit. After you separate, you look for that signal, that the antennas popped out just right. If solar rays, we have power, we're gonna be flying by the moon around that time, so it's a pretty fast ride, we appreciate that. So, and the butterflies start to die down. Then we get into that long, about a month of these major deployments that Scott alluded to. That's where the butterflies will still be there. But I think we're ready. We've tested all of this multiple times. We've eliminated all the little nuances. So I think we're ready. Even though the risk is still there, I think it's pretty pretty low.
Yeah, but I was just going to make one point that I think it's entirely appropriate to highlight in the risks, not just the engineering challenges, but the political ones, which people forget. I mean, especially multiple administrations, elections, as someone once said to me, it's very difficult when your customer is a political system in the end. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say that, although this telescope will launch and, will be deployed, there's also a long period of time where a lot of people are going to be involved in, making sure that the telescope is configured to be able to do its science. And that will take some time. It's one of the reasons why there are these little motors on the back of each segment, because we have to move each of the segments into place to be sure that the mirrors are aligned properly, and will have the optimum optical properties to do the science. And so there's a lot of rehearsals going on. I mean, rehearsals for, for every contingency, and rehearsals for everything that needs to be done. And so even though the hardware might be complete, there is still a lot of work being done by folks.
So, Scott, Stefan was talking about the 27 minutes of the launch and the Terra, 7 minutes of Terra landing on Mars. But it's not like that when the telescope, it's not going to pop out of the fairing of the rocket and be operational. There's going to be some steps. I wonder if you can walk us through that and how you're going to sleep during that time.
The totality of it, from when we launch to we hand off the keys to the scientists, is, a term we'll use, is 6 months. So, well, people are going to be at the edge of their seats for the launch, and we all are, and day one of the launch certainly critical, because then we also get our solar array out, and we go on our own rocket engines to accelerate ourselves out to Lagrange point 2. Those two very time critical. The only two true time critical operations have to occur all in day one. But then from there, there's 2 weeks of heavy lifting of opening up sun shields and deploying optics, wings, these ears that'll come out the nose of the optics for the secondary mirror, and all of those pieces. And then it has to cool down. It'll take 2 months just to allow the nascent amount of thermal energy that is just stuck in our composites, to bleed off. I mean, if you leave your hat outside in the sun and then you put it on the counter, you come back, you can go, oh, it's still warm, right? It hasn't bled that heat out immediately. Same thing with a satellite, right? So when it launches at 70 degrees Fahrenheit and it has to get to minus 400, that takes a while. And then after that, when Mackenzie was talking about the optics, then can start adaptively, moving themselves. I just love to add to a little bit, of what the other three panelists said, though, about the mission and then this inspiration, what it's going to mean. But we built something bigger than the top of the rocket, right? That is eventually going to go up there. We're building the next shoulders for decades of future space science. This isn't a stretch. This wasn't make Hubble a little better. It wasn't taking another mission and push it. This was leap into this band, make it this much bigger, make it this much colder, send it this much further away. So this is a whole new architecture, right, as opposed to a stretch of existing ones.
No, that's a great point. And for whoever want to take this one, I'm just sort of curious. So once it's up there, and we'll take the optimistic view that everything goes well in these rehearsals, that we've tamped down all of the risk. How do you decide where to point it? I mean, how does that work?
There is a very rigorous process that runs to decide that. So as I was saying earlier, you just need a laptop and an idea. And then you have to write down your idea, and you have to say exactly what instruments you want to use, for how long, what configuration, because you want to do this, and you want to use Webb to do this. And then a committee of your peers will read your idea and will determine which one is the most compelling science. And this is done in a completely anonymous fashion, so there is no bias in the process, and that we found works really well. And the cycle one, which we call the first year after commissioning, it's already full chock-a-block of amazing ideas, of single individual targets, surveys, anything that you can think that will produce breakthrough results. And so stay tuned, because between that and the time devoted to the guaranteed to the instrument teams who have some time to practice with their own and take the reward from the years that they spent building their instruments, the first year will be just phenomenal. So buckle up and read the news, read the newspapers.
And we talked a little bit about some of what you would like to see in the science that, we have a pretty good sense that it might produce. But I may ask you to speculate. I mean, obviously, what a telescope and the technology like this will do is maybe teach us or teach scientists what questions to ask and what are sort of the unknown unknowns. But what do you think some of those might be for anyone?
Well, the thing that I'm probably most interested in is understanding the atmospheres of extrasolar planets and really trying to understand what questions do we need to ask to determine whether there may be life on those planets. We know a fair bit about extrasolar planets based on TESS and Kepler, Hubble observations, other observations. But to me, that's a big question, is are we alone? And how do we even find the right scientific questions to ask to determine that? And I think that Webb is going to have a big impact there.
We just hope that for every question that is answered, 100 more are generated, are asked.
The part I like where Thomas was going about that chapter, and which has been discussed here, that's at that beginning. I'm not a scientist. I'm barely an engineer. I've been promoted beyond my level of competence, right, to be the vice president of a big program like this, which is mostly a mechanical engineering feat. I'm an electrical engineer. But at one point in time, I wanted to be a chemical engineer. Chemistry always fascinated me. And I make this statement when I talk to different audiences. When you go back to that first chapter, you would only wish right now in school you were 13.5 billion years old, because chemistry would be very easy. It would just have hydrogen and helium. Who can't memorize element 1 and 2 on the periodic table, right? Darn stars, of course, we're lucky we have them, but that created the beginnings of the periodic table. Fusion reaction occurred, right? And then it starts populating in all the way up to, I think, iron, and then stars blow up, right? And then they fill in this periodic table. So chemistry now stinks, right? It's hard, right? It weeded me out, right? I went to electrical engineering. But we're going to find that. We're going to fill in how that happened, right? How we went from element 1 and 2, right, to the building blocks of every single thing we know, right? So as a layperson, right, in the science world, to me, that's just going to be thrilling to see a chapter be written.
Yeah, and Gregory, what about you? I mean, what are you looking forward to?
So I think we've talked a lot about the mysteries of the origin of the universe. Certainly interested in that, and habitable planets. Are we alone? Within our own solar system, better understanding of the planets. So Webb is going to do a lot in that area that we can't do at that level today. So I'm looking forward to, as we put more rovers on Mars and go to places like Europa, Webb will tell us a lot more about that. So it will generate new questions just in our own solar system, hopefully new missions, so we can go explore and answer some of those questions. So, and I have 3 grandsons, so I'm hoping at some point they will be traveling around the solar system just like we travel around the Beltway, not the Beltway, that gets backed up too much.
So, not that slow.
Yes, so, and the reason I think that's the case is because we're going to unlock so many mysteries to better understand our own solar system and perhaps how to travel to and from based on resources that are on these other planetary bodies.
And as I'm thinking about it, I mean, Antonella, you talked about that first year and to buckle up, but I mean, this is something that could be around for quite some time. So I'm curious how the telescope may evolve over that time, how it's used, how it may evolve, and how is it designed, Scott, maybe you can take this too, or Mackenzie, to sort of adapt to that. I mean, what is the lifespan of this?
10-year plus, we hope. I think that what we have seen with previous mission is the science evolves during that time. And so the telescope and the astronomical community adapts to that, and it becomes more creative. And that's when the new questions are created. And the complement of instruments is so flexible and so powerful that can very well address new questions that pop up during the 10 years. So I think that Webb will stay at the pace with science, and we will see things that we were never expecting when the instruments were built.
Yeah, Scott.
Now, it was designed to last for 10 plus years, but it'll be fuel limited, most likely. Actually, day 1 is the hardest day of our lives. And then you go on and you watch a lot of space missions, Chandra, and how long it's lasted, and Hubble, of course, itself, even without the servicing missions. But what you have is something built to withstand the environment it's in. So it is going to be pelted with micrometeorites. The mirror will withstand that, right, for 10 plus years and still have nanometers of surface figure accuracy, and an adaptive optic, right? The sun shield will get peppered, but it's robust enough to withstand little holes, and it has rip stops so it doesn't ultimately fracture. And then it'll be up to the mission control to just optimally point this thing so we use the least amount of fuel. And it may say you may have been priority 1, 2, and 3, but we're going to run it 2, 1, 3 because I want to look this way, not this way, this way, this way, right? So with that, it'll be, you know, a 10 plus mission life. And by then, hopefully we're capable of sending something up there to refuel it and get some more, you know, out of this incredible instrument. But it's designed to be robust, and it'll come down to the gas in the tank.
I'm going to take some inspiration from Thomas Erbuchen, who took a moment to address the students directly, which I actually thought was very nice. One of the things that I'm really enjoying about this panel, because I've been on some panel with engineers and scientists and rocket manufacturers, and it can get a little wonky, and yet all of you are so good, eloquent in breaking down terms for a layperson like me. But if you could just talk a little bit about, you know, getting into this industry. What's the best way to do it? Do you have to be a scientist or an engineer? What are some of the best paths, you know, to be where you are so that they're sitting on the stage in 10 years?
Yeah, I appreciate that question because, you know, 10,000 people have, you know, touched this program in some way, and they were certainly not all engineers and scientists. The fact is that the whole space endeavor requires skills and really excellence in skills across the board, everything that you can think of. So, you know, we need people who understand accounting and finances, because the reality is we live in the real world, and that is important. We need people who understand policy and politics and how that impacts our programs. We need folks who are really great machinists and people who can build electrical boards. A lot of our work is still built by hand, and we need folks who can do that hands-on work in a really meticulous way. And we need folks who can work contracts. We need folks who can work the cafeteria at our facilities. I mean, it takes all skills. It really does. And so if you have a passion for space or for science, but you aren't an engineer, or you're not a scientist, or you don't want to be either of those things, there really are a lot of pathways. You just have to look at, look at NASA careers, look at careers in industry, and you'll see the number of career paths is really pretty broad.
Anyone else want to?
Yeah, I'd say it's hard, but it's simple. As folks told me when I was young, just do well in school. I mean, that's where it starts, regardless of what you're studying, regardless of what you think you want to be today. Just be really good at it. Take the time, put the time in. The other thing I will add is so the world is changing. It's already changed, and it's accelerating. As we talk about global partnerships and global engagement, make sure you spend time with other people who are not like you, because it's critical for these teams to work together when we're different: language, color, gender, geography. Spend time with other people, just like it would be your brother or sister. So as you go into this business, that will just become organic for partnerships, for hiring, for promotions, bringing more people into this space business. It's critically important. Can't stress it enough.
All right, so now I'm going to ask a little bit of a tougher question, but I'll frame it as politely as I can. It's had some challenges over the years. I wonder if you can talk about how you've overcome them, not just on the technical side, but when there are members of Congress calling for the program to be killed, what do you say to them about why this is worth it and why we should continue to persevere?
So I'll start, then I'll point to Scott. He's always my backup when I can't answer. The number one thing is transparency. We can't run from problems. This is hard stuff. It's really tough. I think Thomas was quoted many times in a recent article about the complexity. It's real. We have an amazing team, some of the smartest people in the world. And when we can't find them, we go find them somewhere else. But the transparency is important. We know what the challenge is or was. We're looking at alternatives to improve it, and we go off and make it happen. and we report back to the folks who are giving us grief, as we should, right? So we all have customers. We have to be transparent with them. Sometimes we don't even do it internally as we should, and certainly not externally. So I think those are some of the things that we've really gotten really good at, or certainly better in the past few years.
Please, Scott.
The thing I'll add is it's a sustained relationship. Transparency. I had a great mentor who once explained to me, if every time you go to somebody, it's with your hand out this way as opposed to this way, you're going to be in trouble, because every time that phone rings or that door knocks, they're going to think you're asking for something or explaining, something went wrong. So it's the persistency. It's when things are going good, also explaining that. It's also explaining when we have a successful test, what the next one is and what are the complications and the risk of what's upcoming. So it's about persistency. The last thing you could do is be in there having conversations like I do with my NASA customer. We live, Thomas, and Greg and I were, even at the headquarters and executive, we're in a meeting every other week with my boss and my boss's boss, right? As I run the program, talking in the details of anything from a washer to a major move and a test constantly. We've been doing this on a weekly rhythm. And at first you're like, oh, I feel like it's punishment because I have to keep answering. When you realize after it's not, it's actually so much better, because that revisit rate enables you to get through the things, in shorter cycle than it does always having to go, 3 months back and then go forward. So it's the rhythm too.
Yeah, and I would say that, Greg mentioned earlier that we have great stakeholders, right? I feel really fortunate when we talk to folks on the Hill, when we talk to the administration. I mean, we've got a lot of great elected officials and a lot of great folks working in the agencies. And, they get it. They want to do bold and ambitious things. We're all taxpayers, right? So we're paying for it too. So that transparency is really important. That communication is really important. And making sure that we're all held accountable so that the folks who are really working to support out in the stakeholder community have what they need to feel comfortable that, hey, we can do these bold things. But I think, I'm constantly impressed by the stakeholder community and the folks here in Washington and their desire and willingness to do these bold things.
And then, of course, there's the science and what you may get from it. And yeah.
Yeah, you have to be inspiring. You have to remember people what's the ultimate goal of this thing. It's not just to put it out there. It's change the way you see the universe. It's changing the way you see the night sky, because everybody, not only astronomers, are impressed by the magnificence of these objectives. And so I think you have to communicate it. You have to communicate it to the public. You need the public behind you. You need the support of the astronomical community. You need the support of the public, as we've seen with many missions before.
And in some ways you think, can you put a price tag, on that? And I, we place us in the context of what Thomas Zurbuchen was talking about rover on Mars and getting those samples, about a helicopter flying on Mars, all of the things that are going on. It's really incredible. We're going to have a couple of questions from some of our students who can maybe begin coming up, but before they come up, I just kind of want to go around, sort of a lightning round. How's everyone feeling a few months out? And just some sort of last minute predictions, thoughts on how things are going to go. Why don't we go from Gregory across to...
So I'm certainly excited, anxious. Butterflies didn't start yet, but they will in a few months. I'm just excited. I think we're in a good place. We're going to be shipping pretty soon, doing the final closeouts. So we're looking forward to getting down to South America and start the processing and mating with the rocket and getting on with the science. The teams are ready. I think Mackenzie and Antonella talked about the team rehearsing. I mean, they're really sharp. They know what they're doing. They know if we have an issue, we have all kinds of contingency plans. I was talking to one of the young students this morning about some of those things if we run into issues. So I'm just excited, ready to go.
Yeah, I can't help but be a little impatient. I'm very excited as well. I'm really, looking forward to, seeing everyone who has worked on this telescope be able to see it launched. I think that just being able to, witness that is a really special thing, before we get to all the science phase.
Yeah, the European Space Agency, we're so committed to this mission that we're all holding our collective breath And the European astronomical community is so engaged and ready to see the results that will come down. So for me, what I'm looking forward those early release observations that will show to the universe that Webb is ready and is just phenomenal and magnificent. So I think that people should stay tuned for those because it will be spectacular.
I just have to keep trying to break this 20-year marathon down to small sprints. And I just keep looking at what's tomorrow. And the focus on this is 5-6 more days of work. And then we actually lift the telescope off of an integration stand it's been on for years and move it onto the dolly that we will then, after that, turn it horizontal so we can process it and put it in a shipping container to then a couple days after that, put it on a boat, and it just, to me, it's chunk, right? And then we've had advanced crews down in Peru, incredibly welcomed by the team there to, both get used to the environment there and the facility and walk through the control centers and see other rockets process. So we got people out there and I don't want to say we're just staring down. We see the end in sight, but we try not to possess ourselves looking that way. It's just, each next step in front of us. So, and that's it. I mean, we are lifting the vehicle next week, which is the start of the process to put it in the shipping container for a program that was initiated in 2002. So,
Well, congrats and good luck, and our fingers will be crossed. Did we have any students from GW want to come up and ask a question, or I guess the mic's coming over to you all? And if you could just sort of introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Mark Yamakaitis from George Washington University. I'm studying mechanical engineering there. We're all here from the rocket team where we work on competition to launch rockets. We work on that. Most of us are engineers here. Thank you for taking our questions. I was wondering, NASA is currently planning to use like an increased focus on using satellites to monitor global climate change trends. Is the French government planning anything similar?
Or the Europeans?
Well, the Europeans definitely have a very, very active program to look at Earth. And to look at the impact of climate. And Thomas just mentioned earlier that there is now an agreement being worked out to do even more of that. So absolutely, climate change is on everybody's mind, and we will see a lot of action happening also because we know it's urgent. There is no time.
And if I could add, Thomas also referenced the SWAT mission, it's a direct collaboration with CNES, and that mission will launch next year. And all of the integration and testing is going on right now in Toulouse. So we're looking forward to that. And that's a follow-on from many other engagements with the French government and CNES.
And do we have time for one more? It looks like Victoria's coming down. And if you could, I'm going to ask you a question. You guys were part of this rocket team. Tell us, whoever has the mic, tell us a little bit about, didn't you just had a competition or something? I want to hear about that. That sounds really cool.
So we competed just this past June in the Spaceport America Cup, IREC 2021. And basically what happens there is you have collegiate teams from not only across the United States, but from across the world basically come, bring the projects that they've been working on for almost an entire year and launch them sometimes to 10,000 feet. Other teams do 30,000 feet. We made a single stage rocket that launched to 10,000 feet, brought up a laser communication demonstration. So essentially you had a 3U CubeSat that was going to be deployed out of the rocket, separate into 1.5 U CubeSats. They would kind of move around relative to each other. And the goal was to gimbal a laser to essentially communicate timing information to sync up times between those two modules.
Awesome.
And so it was a very phenomenal experience. We were very fortunate to have the university to back us to finish that project virtual all through last year. And we were able to get together and actually launch this in April at Culpeper, Virginia. So very phenomenal experience. I'm glad to have our faculty advisor here, Dr. Murray Snyder, to support us, and really the university and the dean of our engineering school to back us behind all that. Just
Okay, Stefan,
phenomenal.
did you hear that? Yes.
Congratulations.
Congrats, that's really cool. We'll give you the final question.
Actually, I'm going to pass off the final question to payload captain this year here to ask.
Hi, my name is Phoenix Price. I am studying mechanical engineering and physics. Our final question is, what do you guys foresee being the primary government and commercial ventures as we expand further into space?
That's a great question. So the primary government and commercial ventures going forward, yeah. I guess future opportunities to collaborate.
Yeah, so I'll start it off, and Mackenzie probably have some and others. We have many of those going on now. Thomas talked about some of those. As we build certainly more CubeSats, small sats, many of these are commercial. We're actually doing data buys, so that's all commercial. We just buy it like you would buy data any citizen would. As we continue to do space exploration, human exploration, the Artemis program going to the moon, many of those, I'll use the term partnerships, will be public-private. We're using commercial now to take crew to the space station. So I see that trend picking up more steam rather than going the other way.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, someone was mentioning, the Earth System Observatory and all of the other climate change and Earth monitoring missions and measurements that need to go forward. I think that there is going to be a lot of public-private partnership in that space. Space science has, I think, almost always been a public-private partnership of some kind. The industrial base has always made significant contributions to NASA missions, to international missions. So I think there's going to continue to be a lot of space there. But I think when it comes to, the existential crisis of our time of adapting and mitigating climate change, there is going to be a lot of public-private partnership because there's simply too much work there to be done by any one organization.
Great. Well, thanks so much.
Could I add one
Go ahead.
thing to it?
Yep, of course.
So as we talk about public, private, and commercial, to add on to what Mackenzie said, NASA has a lot of reach. We do a lot. We have a decent budget, but depending on which week you ask, about 85% of those dollars are actually spent out in the industrial base, out in the commercial world. And it's been that way for a long time, plus all of the additional leverage and synergism from our global partners. So it's always been in the marketplace more so than inside the fence at NASA.
Oh, that's great. That was fantastic. Thanks to all of you for being here. Thanks to the Embassy, to the French American Cultural Foundation, and to all of our GW students. I end with saying, go Ariane 5, go James Webb Telescope. We're looking forward to all the best. Bonne chance.
Story that needs to be told, and it's just the beginning of getting it out there and spreading this word to all ages, demographics, national and international. I just wanted you all to know that the inception for this came back January of 2020, before COVID changed our lives, with an incredible event that Ambassador Etienne did at his residence. And he came up with a quote that I use repeatedly, and just to get it right, it says, "Space is unforgiving. So it takes all talents to make progress." And I think that's just the heart and soul of this mission. And that's a quote that needs repeating as much as possible. And then we were very fortunate, selfishly, to have a member of Arianespace's senior team, Aaron Lewis, as the vice chair for the French American Cultural Foundation. And then we got NASA, and we all got to move forward. And I've never seen so much collaboration, camaraderie, and just fun. I mean, you can just see the dynamics between these folks to see how well they example the idea of working together, and that's something we can take into our daily lives. And the last point I'd like to make is I think it was the ladies who talked about culture, and we seek to broaden the understanding of culture beyond the traditional arts and music, and instead everything that touches humanity and is the soul of a nation. And in our context, between France and America. So we want to expand it to AI and science and maybe the science of wine, all kinds of things that I think people would enjoy. And I thank you so much, particularly for your leadership today. And we can all come away knowing something we didn't know, and we can follow Chris and his stories as he traces this forward to December. So thank you all. Thank you to the embassy for being fabulous hosts. And on the way out, please pick up a little treat from Dog Tag Bakery that was made specially for today's event. Thank you and travel well, everyone.
Yourself and others.